Okay, I think we can start now. I'm going to make a brief introduction so that I hand over to Chan. So thank you everyone for joining and welcome to today's session, Design Systems and their Impact on the Overall Customer Experience. My name is Mauro Litsure and I'm a UX designer from Mozambique. I am instilling a design-driven culture in the corporate industry in my city, and I will be hosting today's session with Shanetsa Mukahanana. A little bit about Shanetsa, but I will allow him to introduce himself. Shanetsa is a design system advocate who has been happily transforming organizations in the way their digital products impact their customers' interactions. Every client-facing digital product has an interface of some sort, and it is important to understand that it is a very critical touch point that requires careful crafting. That is the purpose of today's topic about design systems and how they impact the customers. Today, Shanetsa will talk to us about what causes bad user experiences, how to set a good foundation for your design system efforts, direct and indirect benefits of a good design system, how and where to start with what you have so far. Please note that this session is interactive and we hope that you contribute as much as possible. Feel free to turn your cameras on so that we can have a better interaction between everyone that has joined us. I will now let Shanetsa introduce himself and enlighten us on this very interesting topic. Chan, it's over to you now.
Cool, thanks you so much, Mauro. And thanks to everyone who's on the call. I'm going to switch on my camera briefly. Oh, there we go. So, hi, everyone. So I am Shanetsa. A lot of people that know me call me Chan, have done so for quite a while. And yeah, I am a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a creative, I'm a speaker, I'm a problem solver, I'm a sci-fi enthusiast. And it's been quite a journey, I guess, to sort of get to where I am. But design systems or just organizing the way that we design interfaces has always been something that I've been passionate about. I guess even before design systems were around, from the days of creating style guides in PDF and sending them out. I went through all of that just to maintain a standard quality and consistency across the platforms that I was creating or that I was part of creating. So yes, currently I am working at ABSA in South Africa, in Joburg, and I am the design standards manager, where I am also busy building a design system for ABSA. So yeah, I am going to start sharing my screen. I'm just going to see if I can still see what's happening when I share my screen. Hopefully, when I'm in presentation mode, I can still see what's going on the other screens. Okay. Right, let me know when you can see my screen. Can you see it?
Yeah, your screen is here, Chan.
All right, perfect. I see Vince has raised his hand.
Yeah, Vince.
Oh, just saying I could see your screen. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks so much, Vince. All right, cool. So yes, I can still see some people in presentation mode, which is great. Let me, okay. All right, cool. So I'll be able to see any hands that have been raised. All right, cool. So welcome to everyone. So like I said, I like talking about design. I like talking about design systems. And hopefully you will get something from this session that we're going to have. Please feel free to ask questions, as many questions as you can. I've got quite a lot of slides. I'm going to try and get through them as quickly as possible so that we can leave more time to sort of having a discussion instead of just me talking. All right, so we're talking about design systems and their impact on the overall customer experience. And before I jump directly into that, I just want to sort of marvel at how roads work. So I live in Joburg, and Joburg has lots of cars. Joburg has a lot of cars. There are a lot of roads. I'm glad we're working from home right now because the morning commute to the office was always a nightmare. But now at least, the morning commute is walking from the bedroom to the office. But like roads are like amazing. When you look at the roadworks and when you look at the fact that we have these metal machines that are driving at incredible speeds along the roads, going in all sorts of directions, and with different people behind the steering wheel, all going in different directions with different things on their minds. Some focused, some very distracted. It's actually a miracle that we don't have, that many road accidents. Yes, we do still have road accidents, but when I think of it that way, it's actually incredible that we don't have like that many accidents. Like these machines have like mini explosions that are happening in their engines, and they're going like at incredible speeds, and they've got like this flammable liquid in the back. Yeah, it sounds like a recipe for disaster, but it still works. We still manage to get it to work every day, every morning. People go back and forth successfully. So like on that sort of topic of travel and roads and going back and forth, let's say you are traveling, you're going on holiday. So you've packed your bags in your car, you've got your nice little playlist going, and you're heading out, you're going to see family by the coast or in a town that you haven't visited in a while. And during the time that you haven't visited, there's another town like along the way that has been built. And you've never been to that town, it's a new town. So great idea, you're going to pass through that new town and see what it's like and what's happening there. So you drive off, and on your way, you see the sign that we have on the left-hand side there. And immediately the sign means the speed limit in this area is 30 kilometers per hour or 30 miles, depending on which country you're in. But you immediately recognize what the sign means and what it's communicating to you, so you slow down. And then after a while, you see the sign on the right-hand side, and that sign is telling you that there are loose stones in the road that you're traveling on. So again, you slow down, you exercise extreme caution, you're watching the road to make sure that there are no obstructions in the road and there are no rocks that could fall on your car. Awesome, everything is going well. This trip is fantastic. Then next you come to a traffic light. The traffic light is red, you know exactly what that means, right? So you stop. When the traffic light is orange or yellow, you also know exactly what that means, right? You stop, or unless it's unsafe to do so. And then the traffic light is green, and off you go. You're back on the road. And all of this is straightforward. This is stuff that we all know. But then now, as you arrive in this new town, you then come across this. So clearly it's a sign that says stop, but it doesn't look like all the other stop signs that we're used to seeing. And when you look at it, it's very sort of easy for you to start doubting the meaning of it. Like, what does it actually mean? What is the sign trying to communicate to me? Is it a suggestion that I can stop if I want to, but I can continue going? Is it saying I can go, but the word says stop? So it's a bit confusing. It's something that we're not used to. This is something that is new. So anyway, you proceed with caution and you drive through that intersection. You turn into the main road in this small town. And as you turn into the main road in this small town, you realize the other cars are going in the other direction. And you're driving on the left-hand side like we do in Southern Africa. And so everything is fine. You are in the right, but everyone else is now driving in the opposite direction. And to make it worse, they start hooting at you and shouting and, you know, yelling out things that, you know, they wouldn't say in front of their mothers. So now you're really confused. It's really bad. You're like, you know, what's going on here? Let me just stop, okay? It's very confusing. I don't know what to do. I don't know what's going on. Let me stop. Let me find somewhere to park and figure out what is happening here. Like what exactly is happening in this town. As you're about to stop, you see this sign here. I'll give you a chance to sort of try and read it. And I'm sure for us and where we come from, this is an extremely difficult sign to read and to actually figure out. You don't know if you take out your calculator and your calendar and actually like try and figure out where are we, what month is it, which side, and what's going on, and like what time is it, all of that. You know, you need to do a whole lot of figuring. It's not clear exactly what the sign is trying to say. And so this level of confusion that you will be feeling at this time, sort of this just like, you know, frustration and confusion that you're feeling at this time, that's exactly how our customers feel. So this is how our customers feel when they move between the different platforms, when they move between the different websites and the apps that we design at times. And you know, that frustration that you would feel in that scenario where you're on that road, where you're driving through that town, that's the frustration that they feel when they are sort of trying to find their way and navigate websites where the rules are always changing and apps where, you know, best practice isn't followed. And so if you're like me, I think you would try and get out of that town as quickly as possible. Like, just get me out of this place, and you know, I'm just going to continue on the roads that follow the rules that I know and understand, and I'm going to get to my destination safely without any incident. So I think the reason why we don't have as much chaos that we have, like as much chaos on the roads, is that there are laws and regulations that govern like how the roads work. There are laws and regulations that govern the different signs that we have. There are rules of the road that we need to follow, and there are rules, there are markings that need to be put on the road when a road is constructed. So all the different municipalities, all the towns, everyone has to abide by these rules and by these laws so that everything makes sense to everyone. So that even if you're coming from a different town, the roads there are still going to make sense. You'll still be able to drive on that road, regardless of where you're coming from, because all of these rules and these regulations and these laws have been consistently applied, and they have been followed across all the different roads that we have in the country. And even for the pedestrians, even for the people that are traveling and that know, all of these rules and these laws are published so that everyone is aware of how these things are actually supposed to work. So here in South Africa, we've got the K53, in Zim, there's the highway code, and in Mozambique, I'm not going to try and pronounce that, lest I butcher it, but there are guidelines as to how things are supposed to work and how the rules are supposed to operate, and how drivers are supposed to operate as well. So in the same way that we have these rules and regulations that govern how roads are supposed to work, we also have design systems, and design systems also govern how digital platforms and digital products are supposed to be created, how they're supposed to be built. In the same way that a specific town or municipality can't just choose to do their own thing it's also important that when you're part of an organization, a different team working on a different platform or a different individual working on a certain part of an application cannot just do their own thing. We all need to follow the same rules and the same regulations and the same laws so that we create a consistent experience for all the people that are going to be using that platform or any of the other platforms that are being created by the same organization. And it even exists not just in the same organization, but also across the internet. We've got best practice that needs to apply across different websites. Apple and on iOS and Mac OS and Android, they all have guidelines and rules and systems around how their platform is supposed to operate and how you're supposed to build onto their platforms. So this is the role that design systems play. They play that similar role to the, how the Department of Transport has rules and regulations for the roads. So looking at like the user experience. So what constitutes a bad user experience? What are the main culprits that sort of cause people to have a bad user experience? I'm just going to go through some examples. And I'm just going to mention that these are not, they don't cover all the different instances. Some of them are very sort of specific to the product and to the industry and to the platform and so on. But I'm just going to go through the general issues that make for a bad user experience that usually cause us as users and our users to have a bad experience. And the first one is obviously poor performance. There is nothing as frustrating as going to an app or a website that is just unresponsive. That just takes long, it's laggy, and it's bad. It is so frustrating to have to wait for something to happen. You click on a button and you don't know if there's anything happened. Is it frozen? Is something wrong or not? Or it's just taking its sweet time. Now that can be frustrating. And in a lot of cases, if it's a service that you can get somewhere else, you'll most likely leave the website or the app if it's unresponsive and if the performance is poor. So that's the first one. And then the second one is poor use of color. Now, this is a very basic and very fundamental one, but surprisingly, we still see instances of this like poor use of color across different websites. There are certain colors and color combinations that might look cool, they might look great, but they actually are not practical and make it difficult for users to actually consume the content or the service that you're providing to them. And then you also get gems like this one. And this is actually a real website. It's up and running still. If you don't like your eyes, I can share the URL with you and you can visit it. I think at this point, the website has become a bit of a meme, which is probably why they're not updating it. But it had been cited, sorry, in so many articles just for the bad use of color that I think they just embraced it and they're keeping it that way. But even without extreme cases like that, just bad color combinations can lead to content that's illegible, someone actually not understanding what they need to do or not being able to read, especially if that person has some sort of a visual disability, then it could make that experience even worse. And so just picking the right colors is also like a very key component that's going to lead to a better user experience. The next one is poor typography. And this actually happened to me a couple of days ago where I saw an article and I went to the website, but the typography was so bad. The font they were using was extremely thin and their kerning was really bad. And it was just very difficult to actually go through the website and read this article. And in the end, I just gave up and I left. I didn't want to read it that badly. So I just left. And I doubt I'll be going back to that website anytime soon. So things like just paying attention to the font that you're using and the kerning and the leading and the spacing, all of that is just important. It's going to create a bad user experience if you don't pay attention to that kind of detail. Another one is bad navigation. And this is like a really bad one, because when you go to an application or a website that's offering a service as a customer, the thing is, I am looking for something. And if your website doesn't make it easy for me to find what I'm looking for, I'm going to leave. Because if I can't find what I'm looking for, then what's the point of staying at that website? So the navigation has to be very clear. It has to be extremely clear what's the primary navigation, where are the main categories or the main sections that I need that I'm looking for, that I can find, and what do I click on next, so that I get to the information that I'm looking for. So again, that's very important. And then we also have like unclear copy. And again, this is a big one. If I cannot read, or if I cannot understand what I'm reading and what instructions I'm getting from the website or from the application, then it's going to be very confusing for me to understand what to do next, or what is expected of me and what I need to start doing. So you get instances like this. I think this was an Adobe dialogue, which I think they've since improved after someone posted it on Twitter. But I think if you were in the process of installing something and you saw this, like, you wouldn't even know what to press, because you don't know what the outcome is going to be. Like, should I press stop canceling, or should I press continue canceling? And what's going to happen next? Am I going to see another dialogue? It's just so unclear. The text is just so garbled up. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So we get cases where the text doesn't make, the copy doesn't make any sense to us. And then we also get cases where the copy is trying to be a bit too clever. Like in this case, I think it was called click shaming or something like that. This was a trend. It's still there, but I think it was big about maybe 3-4 years ago, where websites would shame you into if you don't click on something, or if you don't subscribe. Like in this case, where they're like, no, I would prefer to waste money. Like trying to shame you, trying to guilt you into clicking on into subscribing to their newsletter. So again, this kind of stuff would put me off. Like, I do not want to associate with a company or an organization that communicates in this way. So this is really poor UX copy, and I'm not going to interact with a brand that does that. And then a really big one, which unfortunately I have to say, is inexperienced designers. Sometimes bad user experiences come about because the designers just don't have enough experience. And a person without enough industry experience can make mistakes. And I'm a guilty party. And a couple of years ago, I think when I started my career, like right in the beginning of my career, I designed a navigation. Like, it was a circular navigation. It was such a nightmare for the developers. They all hated me for it. But the client absolutely loved it. And I loved it. It made the website look like futuristic. It just looked amazing. It was really great. And there was like a little hover animation, where each of the different options would slide out. Like, it was really great, and it was amazing. And I did this, the website was published, and it went live. And then the company started growing. So the client's company started growing, and they needed to add more links to their navigation. And some of the links were extremely long. some of the names, the labels for the links were long. We tried to shorten them, but it wasn't possible. And at that point, I just realized I had messed up, because I had created a pattern that just wasn't scalable. And so we got to a point where, I had to eat humble pie and then go back and tell the client that we had to change their website because the navigation that we had created for them didn't scale. And if we needed to add more links, we needed to come up with something more scalable. So yeah, embarrassing as it is, this is a mistake that I made because of my inexperience. It's a mistake that I'm not going to make anymore, but it did happen. And I'm sure it still happens till this day. And then we also get designers that, I don't know if it's purely inexperience, but maybe it's too much experience. This is the website for the Yale School of Art. I'm sure they view this as a piece of art. You might want to visit the website. It looks exactly like this. I did not exaggerate anything. This is exactly how it looks like. The GIF in the background is animated. So there's a lot happening. There's a lot of flashing and stuff. At least they were considerate enough to have a pause animations button there. But overall, the website is a bit of a nightmare to just navigate and go through, or even read the content on the website. It's quite painful. So yeah, I'm honestly not sure what's going on there, but looks like someone pitched this as a work of art and they thought it was amazing, and they've published it. And then we've also got inconsistency. So I just spoke about inexperienced designers, right? So yes, we've got designers that are inexperienced and they're still learning and they make mistakes. But sometimes, and I'm sure a lot of us fit into this boat, where we do have like very skilled designers. So there are a lot of us that are working in one organization or one team. We're all skilled, we've all got the experience, but the thing is we're not working together. And you can have a bunch of very experienced designers working on the same project, but if they don't collaborate well together, we're going to have inconsistencies. If one team is working on the homepage, the other team is working on the registration page, the other team is working on the content page. If those teams don't coordinate well, and if they don't interact during this process, you could end up with 3 pages that are really well designed, that follow all the guidelines, that follow best practice, but thematically they're all very different. They don't look like they are part of the same website. So it's not just inexperience that will lead to that. Sometimes just not collaborating well together can lead to that happening. And just an example, is the SARS website. So this is the South African Revenue Service. When you go on the homepage, you can see there's that big banner with SARS, the logo. It's blue. There's lots of blue. That's obviously their primary color. The buttons on the right-hand side, on the e-filing side, you've got the square buttons with the icons for logging in and for registering and all of that. But as soon as you click on the link for careers, which is somewhere at the bottom of the screen, as soon as you click on the careers link, the site looks completely different. So now we've got this light blue. Now we've got like the buttons have changed. It's no longer the square buttons with the icons and all of that. So the site looks very different. And it also works very different because this site doesn't have a navigation. So this section of the website has no navigation. And so you kind of need to continuously click the back button if you want to get back to the screen that you were on or where you started off. So you get this, it's the same website, but it looks completely different. Like the 2 sections look completely different. And you can tell that a different set of people worked on one section, possibly a long time ago, and another team of people worked on the other section of the website. So those are just some of the main sort of issues, some of the main usability issues that are sort of drive users away, and that can lead to a bad user experience. And like I said, some of them, it doesn't cover everything. Some of them are more nuanced than this. But I think overall, that's like in general, those are the main issues that people suffer from when they visit a website that has like a really bad experience. And so before I jump into how a design system helps, is there anyone that has a comment or something that they possibly want to say or ask? Anyone? Nothing? All right. All right, cool. So now that we've sort of highlighted all of these issues, so how will a design system help? How will a design system help to improve that experience, and how will it help us to avoid all of those different issues that I just spoke about? So let's just start by defining a design system, just so that we're on the same page in case there's someone who doesn't know. So a design system is a collection of reusable components and patterns that are guided by clear standards that can be assembled together to build any number of applications. So you get all of these different elements that have clear standards and instructions along with them, and you use these, you put these together to create different applications, whether they are web applications, whether they are mobile applications, any different type of applications, even for kiosks and all of that, any digital touch point, you can use a design system. And typically a design system is made up of like the following elements. So first you've got your color palettes. So these are usually the brand colors, including your user interface colors as well. You've got your typographic scales. So these are the fonts that we use. These are the font sizes that we use when we're creating our application. You have your grid definitions. So this is the grid that we use, 8 column, 16 column, and so on. And then you've got your assets. So you've got your icons, you've got illustrations. If you've got photography, then you've got your photography that you use within your application. And then below that, you've got your templates. So you've got templates, so things like your error screens, so things like your success screens, all of those screens that you use a lot, that you use repeatedly, that need to be consistent. So you've got templates for those kind of things, your user profiles, etc. And then you've got your modules, which are bigger pieces. So like your sign in and registration would be a module because it's made up of multiple screens. You've got the sign in screen, you've got the registration part of it, you've got the password recovery part of it, you've got the part where you can change your password. All of that is part of the sign in module. So it's like this pre-built system that can just be plunked into whatever application you're building. And then obviously you've got your components. So you've got your smaller components, you've got your buttons, you've got your input fields, you've got all of those sort of different elements, sliders, etc. And then you've got other elements as well that are dictated. So your shadows, your strokes, your corner radius, and all of those other elements. Then you've got your rules. So these are the rules that actually then are used to govern how you put all of these different elements together. So you've got your design principles, and these are going to talk to what you are actually trying to achieve within that space. What is it that is of utmost importance for your team? Is it the performance of the platform? Is that your main principle? Is it the aesthetics of your products that you sell? Is it the your communication? Is it your language? Is it the clarity? So your principles will then determine how these different elements are then going to be prioritized and put together for a good customer experience. And then you also need to have the implementation guidelines for your developers as well. So your developers need to know and understand how they need to put these things together for the most efficient code, and all of the other guidelines that your dev team needs to have. So they also need to have guidelines. It's not just on the design side, but also on the development side, where we mirror exactly what we are doing in design. And then you've got your editorial or your copy guidelines. So you've got your content and your copy guidelines, how we communicate, how we talk to our customers, what language we use, our voice and tone, what words we use, what words we shouldn't use, and so on. So typically, this is what will make up our design system. So we also have patterns, which we also have patterns which kind of tend to go hand in hand with the modules. But this is how we solve very specific problems. So if we've got a pattern for how to get a user to renew their card, or to renew a product, or to cancel a product, we then codify this and make a pattern that can be reused in many other instances. So say in the banking industry, if someone wants to close an account, they can use that. If someone wants to cancel a card, that they can use that same pattern, and customers will get used to that pattern. They become familiar with it and know exactly what to expect next time they're interacting with your platform. All right, so now we've got our design system. We've got all of these different elements within the design system. Let's look at the direct impact that it's going to have on all of those problems that we spoke about earlier. So the first one we mentioned was poor use of color. So if you've got a well-designed design system and it's well-defined, it should define your color palette, it should define your primary color palette, and how these colors are going to be used. It should also look at accessibility, the different combinations, the way that you can use all of these different fonts with text, and how you can combine the different colors together as well. So a good design system will then define this, which means that the poor use of color that we saw will become very minimal. If everyone is following these guidelines that we would have set in the design system, then it's not going to be likely that someone will actually end up using colors that are not accessible or that lead to a bad user experience. So a design system needs to define the color palette, it needs to define the usage of the colors, define which are your primary and secondary colors, and also define your UI colors that talk to errors and success and warnings and information and so on. So it's critical. Once you do this and once you define this within your design system, then you shouldn't have any more issues with color causing a bad customer experience. And then the next one is like poor typography. And again, your design system should have a type scale. So you should have a well-defined type scale that addresses all the different sizes of text that you need to use in your platform. And this is an example, I think this is from, should be IBM, where you've got like the H1, the H2, the H3, H4, and H5 for the text is well defined. So whoever is going to be designing something, they need to follow these sizes and this scale and this font in order to create a good experience. And a lot of this information is already available in other design systems. So if you were to take a look at other like really good design systems that are out there, you can borrow from some of them. They've done a really good job in sort of defining their type scales and how each of the different fonts and the different font sizes are supposed to be used. They've given recommendations around that. So following these guidelines should mean that we won't have any issues of bad typography on your app or on your website. And then next, we spoke about unclear copy. So, your copy and content that doesn't make sense to the user. And This is from the Shopify design system, Polaris. And this gives a very good example of how to write copy for different elements. So that's how you write the copy for the different buttons. So those are the words that you use. So they say, stay away from words like try, stay away from words like, like not giving a sort of an action when you're putting in a button. So activate Apple Play as an example, instead of try Apple Play, or explore free themes instead of just writing free themes, and view shipping settings instead of just writing settings. So they try to be a lot more descriptive. They've got a very comprehensive UX copy guideline that should guide any designer or content writer who's going to be working with them. So they won't make any of the mistakes that we saw earlier with Adobe. And if everyone on the team is following these guidelines, that means we're going to have consistency across all the designers, all the teams, all the platforms. Even after you leave the team or you leave the company, the person who's going to come after you is going to see these guidelines. They will follow through with these guidelines, which means there's going to be consistency in how you're talking to your customers, even over time. And then the next one that I mentioned was inconsistency, where I was saying, yes, you might have great teams that are just not working well together. And one of the things that we have done is we use component libraries. I think everyone knows about the component libraries. So we use component libraries that we share with all the teams. I think if you're using any of the sort of modern design tools, if you're using Sketch, if you're using Figma, if you're using Adobe XD, they've got a facility for creating a central component library that everyone on the team will be using. And so if you operate this way, it means that everyone is going to have access to the exact same components, which means that you are going to have consistency in how all the different screens and all the designs are being rendered, because you're all consuming from the one central library. So that is for consistency. And then I spoke about the inexperienced designers. And while yes, a design system is not going to be able to sort of coach someone to, immediately improve their skill and scale up, but a design system can still be a great tool for guiding your designer. So if you know that you've got a young team that has designers that are coming straight from varsity or that don't have a lot of industry experience, then you can use your design system to actually walk them through the processes. You can also give them the support they need. You can, really explain how everything is supposed to work, how the different elements come together, and why those elements need to work together. So you can really sort of handhold them just using the design system. Once the content is created, then they'll be able to go through the content and actually get an understanding of what they need to do and what is expected of them. Design system is also like just great guardrails, because the designer is not necessarily designing something from scratch. So they've already got a framework that they're working in. Everything has sort of been defined for them. So they are working within an existing framework, and it's just going to make their work and their growth much, much easier. And then I think one of the biggest issues that causes a lot of bad user experiences is tech debt. So these are the cases where, like I'm sure with the SARS website, one part of the website has been updated, but the other part of the website hasn't been updated yet. It's still looking really bad. Amazon was a bit of a meme some time ago where the homepage looked one way. You go to the products pages, they looked different. When you searched, when you got the results, they looked different. And this was all because of tech debt. And sometimes companies just make the decision to say, you know what, let's focus on the homepage. It's the main landing page. Let's focus on this section. We can do the rest later. But if you're using a well-built design system, what's going to happen is when a component is updated, so when you update a component like that header on the SARS website, when that is updated by the designers, the developers just need to update that in one central place. So they don't need to go digging through different websites, all the different platforms and screens and all of that. They update it in one central place, and those changes are going to be pushed to all the different formats that they need to be consumed, and the entire website is already up to date. So this means that we can make cross-cutting platform changes across an entire platform overnight, because it's being consumed from the same place. So we can literally change an entire website in one setting just by updating one central source where all the different styles have been defined. So that's definitely a very big advantage, and something that will go a long way in improving the customer experience. And then on the topic of poor performance, I think there's a lot that can lead to poor performance on a digital platform. There are servers, there are backend services that might be faulty, that are just slow, maybe it's the connection, and there's so much that can go wrong. But a design system can definitely play a part in improving the performance of a platform. Like, say, for instance, if a particular component is buggy and it's causing a page or a screen or an application to load very slowly or to perform very slowly, if that application is being pulled from a central repository, from the design system repository, then that means it can just be updated and tested within that one place. You don't need to test the entire platform. You don't need to go and update it across the entire platform. You literally change it in that one place and it gets updated directly within the component. And you've already solved the problem. And then there are some other indirect impacts that a design system will have on the customer experience. So like quicker time to market. If you're using a design system, you're obviously going to design much quicker. Your developers are going to be able to build stuff much quicker than they would without it. And so this means that a product can change, a product can be updated. You can create a new product in a very short space of time. They also reduce cost of maintenance. So like I just mentioned, you can literally overhaul an entire web platform overnight if you've got a good design system that's been put in place. And so it's going to, in the long run, it's going to be much cheaper to operate this way instead of having every platform or every section or all your code sort of sitting in different instances. If it's all pulling from one source, then you're going to be saving a lot of cost when it comes to maintenance. And then finally, like just the increased collaboration. So getting ideas, getting components, getting copy and content from different people on the team. Overall, it's just going to lead to a better project. Because once designers are not focused on creating buttons all over and over again and to fix the leading and the type all over again, they can actually now focus on real problems. They can actually focus on creating a good user experience. They can actually focus on solving the real customer problems, which leads to a much better product overall. All right, so in terms of that impact, I think let me just pause. I see there some messages in the chat. I can't look at them at the moment, but also check if there are any questions or any comments that other people would like to make.
Yeah, I'm taking note of the questions, Chan. I'm placing them in a shared file. Maybe when we come to the Q&A section, I will let the individual ask the question and explain better the question that they have. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Would you mind if we sort of jump to that as a bit of a break? I just feel like it gets a bit boring and monotonous when someone is just talking, droning on and on the whole time.
Yeah, no, we can do that for sure, for
All
sure.
right, cool.
Okay, so if you're all comfortable with sharing, I have a question from Annaline. Annaline, would you like
Yes.
to turn your mic on, your video maybe, and ask your question?
Hi, Chan, hi. I'm driving, so
Hey,
I don't
Annie.
think the video is the best, so I'm putting that off at the moment. So I think my question was just how would you advise to use that, that inconsistency in a very big organization where everybody works like in their own silo? How do you get that together? That was my one question. And then the other one, let me just check. That one was, would you advocate that the web and the mobile design system live in one space or one file, which could be very big, or let's just say one space, so that everybody points to one place where they can access it? That was my two questions. Thanks.
Okay, great. So I think starting with your first question, I think the best way, from what I've seen, just from my experience, within large organizations, the best way is to really lobby to the decision makers, so all the different stakeholders, and literally just show them. So I usually go through an exercise where you do an audit, you take screenshots of different things, and then set up a session with the stakeholders, and then just take them through some of those screens and say, okay, this is how someone, say for example, this is how someone buys an airtime on this platform. This is how someone buys airtime on this other platform. This is how someone buys airtime on this platform. Here we are calling this, these things. Here we're using these actions. Here we're using these actions, and here we're using these actions. This one is 3 steps, this one is 5 steps, and this one is 9 steps. And this can get very confusing if someone were to move from one platform to the other. Is there a way that we can consolidate this? So usually by sort of pointing out the issue, a lot of people will then acknowledge and say, yeah, like I definitely see that there's a problem there. What can we do about that? And that's when you come in and say, okay, we have a plan. This is what we're thinking of doing. We're thinking of setting up this one central place where all of these things can be consumed from, so that we don't have any of these inconsistencies. And we need to collaborate across all the different teams for us to agree on the way forward. So I think that was the first question. And then the second one around having like a mobile and web. I think what I've seen to be most successful is not necessarily to have them sort of intertwined, because some of the paradigms are completely different. And in the mobile space, we've also got like Android and iOS, which further splits that mobile space. So what I recommend is for them to be close to each other. They need to be very close, but they don't necessarily need to be sort of mixed up. And the ideal situation or the ideal setup to have would be a setup where you've got a cascading system where you start by defining the core sort of elements within your design system. You start by defining your color, you start by defining your font scale, so your type scale, not necessarily the fonts, but the scale that you're going to be using. You start by defining like your spacing and all of that. And then all of these things that you've defined can then get cascaded down to mobile and to web. So which means if we decide to change the color, we just change it right at the top. In the mobile, in the web is going to be updated automatically. So all of those shared aspects of our design language will reside in one place, and then they will cascade down to 2 separate spaces, one for mobile for mobile apps and one for web. Don't know if that that answers you, Len.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Thanks.
All right, great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Annaline. Thank you, Chan, for the answers to those questions. The next question is from Risel Whelan. Risel, do you want to?
Hi. Yes, let me just open up the chat so I can see what I asked. Yeah, so I was asking, how do you not become a bottleneck for your developers? And how do you make sure everyone uses the design system, as well as how do you keep it up to date? So I did listen to a Spotify engineer manager from Spotify, which had a very interesting take on it. For anybody else that wants to go listen to it, it is on YouTube. It's a talk by an engineer from Spotify where they had to revamp the design system 3 times. So he had an interesting take on it, but I just want to hear from your perspective in the space that you are in, which is APSA. How do you guys manage that design system and not become a bottleneck where people are waiting on you to create components and create elements to use? And also, how do you then make sure everybody abides by that?
Yeah, so I think for the first part of your question, the process that we have in place and that we are sort of currently putting in place is that the design system is a shared, it's a shared platform. It's a collaborative effort. And while you have a team that manages it, it belongs to everyone. So if a new component is required, the responsibility doesn't sit with one team to create that component for everyone, because then definitely you're going to become a bottleneck. But there's a process that we have outlined to say, if you want to create a new component, these are the steps that you need to take. So if someone comes up and they say, I need a component for doing this thing, and that component doesn't exist at this moment. So we've got that process to say, okay, this is where you start off. This is who you need to talk to. You have this check-in session with the rest of the team. You share what you've done. You have a check-in session with the developers. They check it for feasibility and whether it's going to be possible to build it and so on. And after that, that component is given the stamp and it is added into the design system. So whoever needs to create a new component will be responsible for creating that component. And so they will build it. Yes, it's going to be with the help from the design system team, but ultimately it's their responsibility to create that component. So I'm not sure if that answers the first part.
Yes, it does.
Okay, cool. And then around making people use it, yeah, this is always, it's always a tricky one. So I think the first sort of line that we have put is to have some sort of a review session where all the sort of work that is happening, all the work that is going out, ensure that, you know, it gets seen by the team members so that we can pick up any components that might not be already in the design system, or, you know, if you're not using the right component or if you're not using the component correctly. So that's sort of the first line of defense, to try and catch any sort of stray designs that might be doing something that is not within the design system. And then the second one lies with the developers. So in the same way that we have our design library, the developers also have their dev library, and we try and ensure that our design library and the dev library are mirrored, they're exactly the same. And so when the developers see a component that they don't have in their code library, they usually just raise their hands or they ring a bell, and they let us know that there's a component that is not in the library that we've seen in our designs. Could you please take a look at it? And then we can handle it from that point.
Okay. Thanks
Cool.
for that. I understand what you're saying. Thanks.
All right, cool.
Okay, let's move on to the next question from Nicole. Nicole, are you here with us? Yes. Would you like to share your question?
Sure. I have dogs barking in the background, so I apologize.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
But my question is, with the design system, how do you establish like accessibility standards beyond just color contrast and like kind of help people follow them consistently throughout their designs? So things like tab order and like using the H1 tags and all of that appropriately.
Yeah, that's a good one, and it's something that we've been sort of really pushing to have in place. So I think one of the first things that we are trying to do right now in the team that I'm in is we are getting the developers, so we're getting the engineers on board, and what we're encouraging them to do is to actually build the components with the different sort of accessibility elements built in. So all the different tags that they need to sort of complete are built into the components. And the next step is to then also just to have a linting service running so that if any of those different components do not have any of those tags and any of the required accessibility information in place, then that build is going to fail. So this is something that we've been discussing with the developers, just to try and ensure that we don't get any components, any sort of screens that go out without the relevant accessibility information and tags and ordering populated. And then we're also just trying to encourage the designers, and this is something that's really in its infancy. I think we've had like a couple of meetings around it. But in the previous team that I was with, this is something that we had definitely explored, where we had actually then spoken to the designers so that they work with the developers to ensure that when you're handing over a piece of work to dev, all the different accessibility guidelines, so your tabbing order, your alt tags, your descriptions are also within that document, so that the developers don't have to make it up as they go.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Cool.
Thank you, Nicole. We have a few more questions. Natasha, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Please share your question.
Hello, thank you. I would like to understand a little bit more how would be like the versions for the design system, and after you do kind of an audit of the platform, should you include what you have as the first version and then the next component like the next version, or you should? It's just because I'm in this case right now and I'm using my case as an example to see how you should kind of share with the developers if it's what you have now as a first version, and in the new component that you create a new version, and how you kind of document all of that.
Okay. So what we agreed on with the developers. So they've already got a system that they use, and it's an acronym which I am forgetting. Geez. If I remember, I'll try and share it. But so there are different levels to the changes that you're making. So it could be a small update where you move something because it's not aligned properly, you move it by a few pixels, or you make it a bit wider or narrower, and so on. So that would be like a first sort of level of change or update, which is a minor one. And so we use, we're putting in place a numbering system. So you've got version 1, you've got version 1.0, and version 1.01, and so on. And so that's the format. So if it's a small change, if it's a minor change, then it's version 1.01. So that's like a very minor change. We've moved the text. So this is now version 1.01. So the developers will name it that. And if it's a much bigger change where we've moved major elements around, we've added an icon, we've added an image or something of that nature, we've put a button or we've removed a button, then that's a version 1.1. And in the case where we completely replace the component and we overhaul it and it's a completely new design, that component becomes version 2. I don't know if that answers you, Natasha.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
All right, cool.
Okay, thank you, Natasha. Okay, I have a couple of questions here, Chan, but maybe will also be useful for our participants. So when starting out the design system effort, so I'm focusing here on organizations that don't yet have a design system in place. So who or what are the roles, what are the core roles that the team should have working on the system, and who would normally govern this effort within the organization?
Sorry, could you come again?
When starting out a design system within the organization, who or what roles are the core team roles working on the system, and who would normally govern it?
Okay. I would say the core roles are, it usually starts with a designer. So a designer who's going to be sort of looking at, you know, all your different platforms, all the different designs, and seeing where the consistencies and inconsistencies are, and sort of putting together like the different UI elements that are going to be used going forward. And I think after this exercise, the next step is to talk to your developers, to the engineers. It's extremely important for you to have the engineers on board. I think the first time I tried to do this, I made that mistake of not involving the engineers soon enough. And when I then went to them and was like, ta-da, here's the thing, you know, I had to go back and redo a lot of things because they were not going to work for them. So I would say, yes, you can sort of kick it off from your end as a designer, but definitely get the developers involved as well. If you can, right from the get-go, find someone who's like-minded, then go for it. But if not, then you might need to sort of put some things together and build a case for the business, and then you go and, you know, sort of show them what you're trying to achieve, and then, you know, you might get the technical support that you need.
Great, thank you. There's another question here, and I'll probably give you a scenario.
Okay.
So, which is very common where I come from. So you've got multiple channels already in place for your customers. So let's say you are a bank and you already have your internet banking, your mobile banking, your services at the branch, whatnot. So you want to start with this effort of centralizing or unifying or making it uniform, that the way you present your products, digital products, to your customers. Where do you start, and how do you prioritize on which channel to start with?
Ooh, that is always a tricky one, because in some cases it's political. Is in some cases it's going to be a political decision. It's all about, you know, the stakeholders, who's responsible for which platform and how do they feel about this sort of thing. And there are two approaches. I think I remember seeing a Brad Frost talk where he, like for him, he was recommending going with a smaller platform first. So kicking off with a smaller platform, using it as a test case to actually see if it's going to work and if it's going to be successful. So it's low risk. So it's a smaller platform. There's less risk there. And so, you know, you can kick it off. If it doesn't really work out, there isn't going to be that much harm than if you were to try with the sort of the bigger platforms. In my case, because I think there was support on some of the bigger platforms, and because they're so big, they were already seeing a need for a design system and a better way of working. It was easier for me to then convince the bigger platforms to say, I think we should start working this way. And I think this should be our approach going forward. And so I got buy-in from there. And the good thing about starting with the bigger platforms is once you've got the bigger platform in the bag and they are on board, the smaller platforms, it's going to be much, much easier for you to convince them, because you just tell them, you know, this platform is already running this. And so, you know, it's going to be much easier to convince them to go along with the plan.
Yeah, and on this specific topic or question, when dealing with multiple providers, so you know all these channels are probably developed by different companies or different startups or companies that are outside your organization. How would you recommend that the organization manages this whole this problem within the ecosystem?
Yeah, that's always it's like a very difficult one. And sorry, let me just like repeat that to make sure that I'm answering the right question. So you're talking about a situation where you've got external service providers that will be doing work on behalf of the organization, and
Correct.
how to ensure that they also follow along. I think kicking it off can be a bit of a difficult process, but as long as you talk cost, this is what I've seen. When you talk cost, like for me, when I talk about the cost saving that's going to be involved, and when I talk about sort of the intellectual property, so growing intellectual property and keeping intellectual property that we have, I usually get a good response when I lead with those. So I would typically just walk, and this is talking to sort of the different business units that are procuring these services. So going to them directly and saying, you know what, you've got company X doing this piece of work. If they were doing it in this way, using this resource that we've created, they would probably be able to do that in half the time, which would cost much less than what you're probably paying for right now. And also, they get to contribute. So we bring them on board, and when they're changing stuff, when they're creating new components, when they create new modules, when they create any new sort of elements that they create, we consume them, we put them in our repository so that we can use them later. So this is intellectual property that's going to be sitting directly on our platforms, which doesn't always happen in some of these interactions. So usually when I lead with that, I get a pretty good response, because I think everyone wants to save money.
And increase profits.
And increase profits, exactly. And also, like when I talk about just consistency with the rest of the other platforms that are already existing, then again, that's another key selling point for any sort of business units that are procuring a service. Ideally, the best is to just talk to the procurement department. If your organization has a procurement division, going to them directly, selling the idea to them so that they make it part of their requirements. That's the ideal. It might not always work, but it's the ideal where when a new service is procured, it's in the terms and conditions already that you need to be using our design system. Any new components, any new patterns, any new stuff that you create, you need to add it into our design system, to our repositories with the documentation and so on. So it should be part of the process.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I don't have any more questions here from the list. And is there anyone that has a final question for Chan before we start closing up? Okay, maybe not. Okay, so we've reached the end of today's talk, and we sincerely hope that you leave here energized and with the necessary vision of how to transform your organization and teams when dealing with design systems. I certainly have acquired valuable tips on how to engage in such an effort. I would like to reserve a special praise and thank you to Shanetza for this wonderful talk and availability to share your experience and best practices. And a special thank you to everyone that has joined us. Thank you very much for staying focused throughout this session. So thank you all and have a good day or evening wherever you are. I hope to see you soon in the future events. Chan, it was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Mauro. Thank you. Really appreciate
Pleasure.
you inviting me.
Yeah. And thank you everyone.
And thank you to everyone. All right. Bye-bye.
We'll share the recording during the week so that you can get your notes cleared up.
All right, cool.
Thank you very much.